Hi there, Duke fans, and welcome to, I have no idea what episode it is.
165.
Episode number 165. I should do my homework in advance. I should plan these things before I start. Episode 165 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. Yes, there is actually some basketball news to talk about, but before we get to that, let's do introductions. I am, as always, in Atlanta, Georgia, Jason Evans. I will be hosting this fine, fun fest this week. Joining me out of Durham, North Carolina is Sam Klein. Sam, how you doing?
I am okay. I am a little tired. It was grad student campout this weekend, which you might be aware of if you follow Duke men's basketball anywhere on social media. So we will get to my grad student campout experience in the parting shots, but I am very tired right now. I would describe
Sam, what you just did is known as a deep tease. You tease something a long way away. I like it. That's good programming.
I've actually worked part-time in media for the last 5 years, so I am vaguely familiar with industry terminology, but thank you for the additional lecture.
Absolutely, absolutely. And also joining us, as always, out of Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, Donald Wine. Donald, what's going on in your life right now?
Well, there's been a lot of travel, and there'll be some travel coming up, a deep tease for later on as well.
But that's called a callback, Jason.
Oh, yes.
Nice.
Yeah, it's been fun, and I am tired this morning. Or it's not even this morning. It's almost 5 o'clock, and I'm still tired. But I didn't actually do a camp out like Sam did, so I think I'm just getting older.
You know, I should tell folks, it's kind of weird. We may be off our game or more on our game. I'm not sure, but the application that we're using to do this week's podcast includes, for the first time, a video option. Now, we could have done video in the past, but we've always just done, phones and computers and that kind of thing. But so now we're looking at each other as we're doing this, and we're just like staring at each other's faces, very confused. I think Donald's making faces at me. This is not easy. I'm trying to keep it together, guys, because there is news that we need to talk about. The basketball schedule has dropped. We knew about the non-conference games, but now we know about the conference games. ACC on a 20-game schedule this year, so everyone is playing a lot more games than they have in the past. Hey, Sam, let me go to you first. Give me your take. What do you see from the schedule? If you want, start with Duke, and then at some point we could also maybe get into some other teams.
Sure. So on the Duke front, I am pleasantly surprised actually at how Duke didn't get so many of these tough stretches this year where there are weird turnarounds or excessive amount of time spent on the road. So taking a look at the ACC, at Duke's ACC schedule, they've only got 2 of those dreaded 48-hour or fewer turnarounds. They're both Saturday night to Monday night games, or they're both Saturday to Monday night games, which means that they're not actually going to be less than 48 hours. They'll be, at worst, approximately 48 hours, but there won't be any of these there's not going to be a Thursday evening, Saturday afternoon, none of those. There's 2 Saturday to Mondays. Both of them are road games going to home games, again, making it a little bit easier, whereby Duke is not traveling on the road during one of these quick turnarounds. Both times they're coming home, and they're both not long trips. One is the Saturday UNC game in the middle of the season. They're playing in Chapel Hill, and then they're home against Florida State. And obviously, when Duke goes to Chapel Hill, it's not like they even have to stay overnight on either end of the trip. And then also the trip to UVA on a Saturday night, where they'll return home and play NC State on a Monday night. So that NC State game and maybe that FSU game both maybe feel a little bit trappy, but being able to come home and play in front of the home crowd is going to be good for Duke. And I double-checked that NC State game, which is towards the end of the season. Duke's got UVA on a Saturday night, then NC State on a Monday night at home, and then finish the season at home against Carolina. That NC State game is still during when school is in session, so it's not like we're going to be randomly missing a bunch of the students for that pivotal end of season home game against a rival that somehow seems to beat Duke much more often than they should. So on that front, Duke doesn't really suffer all that much. Otherwise, in the schedule, not that many stretches where they're on the road a lot. There's only one stretch of games where they're on the road 3 times in a row, the last of which is that UNC game. So again, Duke is, mostly home when they play UNC. They just happen to drive down the road to Chapel Hill to play the game. So it's not like Duke is going through these crazy long stretches of being on the road in weird places. There's one trip, it looks like, where they probably stay up north. They're at Boston College and at Syracuse on consecutive road games. So that's probably the only time when Duke spends a lot of time on the road. For the most part, the road games are pretty well split up with the home games. There's one stretch where I think Duke plays 3 home games in a row in Durham. And then obviously the other weird thing that is now a function, Jason, as you mentioned, of that 20-game ACC schedule is that Duke has to play one really early game. So they are in East Lansing to play Michigan State in the ACC Big Ten Challenge game. Oh my goodness, how much hype is there going to be around that, with Michigan State being preseason number 1? That's in early December on a Tuesday evening. Friday night, Duke is at Virginia Tech right after that. So that might be one of the ones where Duke's having a little bit of a hangover. Obviously, it's in the middle of a week, but that Virginia Tech game is the last game they have before they go on exam break. So they get a 2-week break after that, which means they can be really focused and locked in for it. They have to play that game obviously very early in the schedule. They get the Virginia Tech and then the long break and then 2 more non-conference games before resuming conference play on New Year's Eve. But I'm not feeling like this schedule looks so bad in terms of getting trapped in places. I haven't looked, admittedly, at the rest of the ACC and how tough it is on them, but Duke's schedule seems to break out pretty favorably this season, at least in my sort of initial estimation.
Yeah, and what I would say about that is there are 3 teams outside of Duke who in the ACC who I expect to be, potential Final Four, certainly Sweet 16 caliber teams. That's UNC, that's Louisville, and that's Virginia. And I looked at the schedule and I immediately went, okay, is there going to be a murderer's row? Is there going to be, are we going to face, like these 3 teams in a row at some point, or 2 of them, back to back or something like that, 2 of them on the road, back to back or whatever it may be. And it turns out that they are all spaced out. They are always, whenever we face them, there tend to be some easier games surrounding it. I think it sets up really, really nicely for us. You mentioned, Sam, that stretch, Syracuse and BC on the road, the first 4 days of February, and then UNC on the road, although it's really back home. I'm going to be very interested in seeing. I actually think that Duke may stay up in the Northeast, that Syracuse on February 1st is a Saturday, and then Boston College on February 4th is a Tuesday. I don't know if I'm Duke, I don't know that I'm going to fly up.
Oh yeah,
Syracuse.
That's what I was expecting. I would think that they would that they'll stick around in the Northeast that weekend, especially since they're playing at Boston College on Saturday night, which means that Saturday and or Sunday, I don't know what the Celtics schedule looks like, but I imagine they'll get some time at the Celtics facility, given the Celtics' deep ties to Duke, with Steve Paliuka being the owner of the Celtics, friend of the podcast, and also more importantly for the purposes of Duke's season, the owner of the Celtics. So has court time,
and father of former players. So
that's right. That's right. Big Duke guy, Steve Paliuka.
Yeah. So anyway, I identified, I sort of feel like that stretch there, the Syracuse and BC games up north, UNC, and then Florida State just a couple days later. To me, that's the most difficult part of the schedule. UNC, obviously, everyone says is a top 10 team. I think Syracuse and Florida State are probably, fringe top 25, certainly have the kind of talent on their roster, the sort of history that could indicate they could rise up and be a really good team. So to me, that's the toughest stretch of the schedule. But boy, compared to past years, for me to say Syracuse, BC, UNC, and Florida State is the toughest stretch on this schedule, that's a lot easier, a lot easier than what we've seen in the past. The only thing about the schedule, and it's not a surprise, we knew this, the only thing about it that I sort of lament is that we're at Virginia. We don't get them back home. And I kind of think Virginia may be really good again, maybe better than some people expect. And I think it's unfortunate that, our one matchup with them, if we are battling them for the top, our one matchup with them being at Virginia puts us at a little disadvantage in that game. Donald, it is your turn. Give me some schedule thoughts.
Yeah, so I think the first thing I looked at was I went through and tried to see, including the exhibition games, when we actually play, because like you guys have talked about, Sam, alluded to the fact that we usually have at least 2 or 3 of these Saturday, Monday turnarounds. And those 2 Saturday, Monday turnarounds are the only 2 Monday games we have on the schedule. We have 10 games on Tuesdays, which it sounds like the ACC with this new expanded schedule is starting to take over Tuesdays, because that is when the bulk of our games are during the week. Normally, in previous years, we used to have games on Wednesdays and Thursdays. We only have 3 on Wednesday and 2 on Thursday this entire season. We also have 11 Saturday games. So that means is A, we've taken over Tuesday, and B, we're going to be on that Saturday, probably primetime slot far more often than not, because I mean, generally when we put that game on a Saturday, that's the game that ESPN likes to circle as a nice primetime tilt. So expect to see, because I don't know if you talked about this, Sam, but I think it's rare that they have released an entire schedule that doesn't have any times on it. And so I think when it comes to that, when they start setting the actual times for some of these games, expect Duke on those Saturday games to be more in the later time slots, because they're going to want to put these guys on national TV as many times as possible to kind of lead into their Saturday night coverage. So
does the Saturday night, does that hold up on Saturdays as much as it does on the weekdays? I feel like sometimes these networks will try to have a premier afternoon game, like the way that Major League Baseball will have 1 or 2 prime games on Saturday afternoons, and then most of the schedule on Saturday night. I guess I haven't paid much attention to it sort of nationally. I know that Duke has their schedule kind of move around on Saturdays. Like sometimes we'll get a Saturday noon or 2 o'clock game. So I guess we'll wait and see. And right, so we don't really know what this whole ACC network effect is going to have on Duke scheduling or other premier program scheduling as far as afternoon Saturdays versus evening Saturdays.
Yeah, I think I think you're right. The addition of the ACC network and having that additional 24 hours of programming for them to do is going to be interesting to see what they do with those time slots. But I think when it comes to the bigger games, like of course, I think you alluded to that. I don't know the last time we've had UNC both of those games be on a Saturday. Usually they have one on a Wednesday or Thursday, and then one on a Saturday.
What do you think? What do you think that's about? I mean, it was a couple of years ago. I feel like forever it was Duke plays UNC on a Wednesday in like the middle of February. Then a couple of years ago it moved to Thursday, which Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, whichever sort of midweek night, doesn't matter. This year they moved it to Saturday, and I didn't see. I'm sure that one of the
both the games are 7 p.m. start. Both the games will be 7 p.m. starts.
Well, I was going to say, which member of the esteemed DBR community went back to figure out when the last time Duke and UNC's 2 games were both on Saturdays were? I don't know if anyone did that research yet, but it's not in my limited lifespan as a Duke fan. So I'm curious as to what went into that decision. I would think that the weeknight games are able to attract more eyeballs than the weekend games, but maybe I'm just off on that.
Well, I think there's 2 things. One, when it comes to the weekend games or the weekday games, that was always the most highly rated broadcast of the season. For
is ESPN. The first game.
Was the first game, yeah, and it was always in February.
Well, or the second one. I mean, no. I think the second game is sometimes just as highly rated.
It's up there, but usually the first game is the most highly watched game.
It's also the first one of the season, right?
The first one of the season.
And it's always sort of strategically placed right after the Super Bowl. So it's like, hey, sports fans, if you have not been watching college basketball yet, it is now rivalry week right now. And the highlight of rivalry week is, maybe Michigan State is playing Michigan, or Kentucky is playing whichever SEC team happens to be good this year.
Right.
None
Duke
of those,
and UNC
none of those
and
games
everything
matter.
else.
It's Duke and Carolina are like the premier matchup, and it is perfectly timed for anyone who hasn't been watching college basketball.
But that also reverberates around college basketball. Putting this game on a Saturday, to me, screams that College Game Day didn't want to just go to one or the other this season. They wanted to do both. And what that also does is it means that all the other leagues are not going to try and put their big time matchups for their conference on that night. So that's a Saturday gone for them, where they can, highlight their league and promote their brand. They have to take a backseat to Duke UNC on 2 Saturdays, which for college basketball is prime real estate.
But those other programs could be saying, if the Duke Carolina game, I guess, is at 7 p.m. on that first. They're both at 7 p.m.
I think they're both 7. Yeah.
Right. So I don't know who who some of these other big programs are playing on those Saturdays, but they could have a noon game or a 2 o'clock or a 4 o'clock to lead into the Duke game.
Lead into it.
To be sort of all day primetime programming. It's not like when Alabama plays Auburn that they can't have any other big games on that day in football. You just have to plan around it.
Right.
So two other things I've got on the schedule really quick, and then we're going to move on to other topics. The first one is I was a little intrigued that they did not choose to put one of the Duke UNC games on this new ACC network, because it may be before your times. You guys may not remember this, but many, many, many years ago, when ESPN launched ESPN2, one of the ways they launched ESPN2 was they put a Duke UNC game on ESPN2.
I remember that.
It was a huge deal, and it put tremendous pressure on cable carriers across the country to pick up ESPN2 because sports fans wanted to. This is the biggest college basketball game of the regular season. Sports fans wanted to see it, and there are a lot of people who say that it helped make ESPN2. It caused people to look and find ESPN2 on their dial, because back then it was like, it was a crazy number. You couldn't even find it. It wasn't like it was right.
It's so quaint. It's so quaint to think that people couldn't find a television channel.
Yeah, I know. It was old, weird stuff back then. But I thought they might, and I still actually think they may do some kind of home team or the home broadcast or they'll figure something out. I bet they'll do something very special on the ACC network for.
They did that for the first football game for Miami, Florida. They had Mark Richt and John Beeson doing like kind of a play-by-play and analysis, kind of like they do for the Final Four. They did that on the ACC network. So I would expect the ACC network, like you said, to have some sort of related coverage, or maybe even a simulcast with just ACC broadcasters or something like that.
Didn't Miami fire Mark Richt?
No, he quit.
Oh, he quit. I was going to say that'd be a weird way to pump up the conference.
Yeah.
All right. So wait. So the other thing I wanted to mention just really quickly, folks, if you have only been paying attention to Duke, there's a really interesting wrinkle in the new ACC schedule, which is that everyone not named Duke plays Kansas in the Champions Classic. We have the Champions Classic that is the biggest thing. Everyone else in the conference, every single other team, they open their season. Very first game on November 5th and November 6th is a conference game. And I was just like, I think I'd sort of heard that this might happen. I hadn't thought that much about it. I mean, wow, what a way. You don't get to start with your cupcake. You don't get to start with even a non-conference game. You're immediately launching into the ACC season in your very first game of the year, and I think it's going to create some really interesting stuff. There's some great matchups. Virginia's playing at Syracuse, Notre Dame's playing at North Carolina, and Louisville's at Miami. Those are sort of the big team. Those are the best matchups that I see. The fact that Virginia and Louisville, two of the top tier contenders, are on the road against at least decent, in the case of Syracuse, a pretty good team, but in Miami, at least a decent team, and Notre Dame, another decent team that sometimes gives North Carolina fits. I just think it's really interesting that the start of the ACC season is literally the start of the season. We're going to get to know something about these teams very, very early on.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about this.
I don't like
I feel like
Really
I feel like
weird.
at the end of the season. Well, it's an interesting wrinkle because at the end of the season every year, there's a lot of discussion about, where should teams be seated in the NCAA tournament? How much do the results in November affect, predictive result? Like, how much do those lead into predictions about who teams are going to be in March? And it's always a weird conversation because you sort of play one set of teams early, which can include some good games, right? Duke always plays in the Champions Classic. They're going to play in one of these Thanksgiving tournaments. I think this year they're going to get to play like Georgetown or Berkeley,
Texas.
like big Texas, like these other big programs. Maybe not the very best, but they're going to get their chance against those programs. You don't really get to see the conference games early. But now, if Syracuse is playing Virginia early in the season, that is arguably as big of as an early season matchup as Duke and Kansas is, right? Those are two very prominent national programs. Virginia just won the national championship. So it's going to be sort of a weird new barometer on which conferences are best and who looks good early in the season. And then comparing it, if Syracuse plays Virginia in November, then they might get to play them again in February. They're going to be totally different teams. So we're going to get a much more interesting measuring stick on these teams because they're going to come back to these similar opponents much later in the season.
Yeah, and I mean, to cap this off, I think that looking at that, I don't think that this is going to be something that I think Coach K will try to hold out as long as possible at trying to be one of those teams that opens up against a conference opponent. That's a really tough ask for these teams. And I think a lot of I don't know how long, if this is an experimental thing or if there's something that they're planning on doing, but I don't really like just going straight into it. I feel like a lot of these teams are going to want to ease into the season by playing some of these lesser tier teams because they want to see what their team can do, figure out their assignments, figure out their rotations, and kind of see who they can trust. This is a big ask, and so it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out and the type of play that we see come November 5th and 6th when these teams start playing.
Okay, guys, there was other basketball-related news this week, and Donald, this is your specialty. We got a peek at the new Duke uniforms. Looks like the black is gone.
Well, the black isn't gone, but let's talk about them. They've broken it down into three. We've seen a glimpse of the home jersey, and if you're thinking when the team rolls out on the court for Countdown to Craziness, you're thinking that you're watching a 99 team, it's because they're going to look like them. The jerseys harken back to what we saw from Duke in the mid to late 90s and early 2000s. They've gotten rid of the. It's unclear if they've gotten rid of the throwbacks, but they've taken what we had in the 90s with the black or with the blue side panels on the shirt and the shorts, and they've reinstituted that. So it's white with blue side panels on the home jersey. On the back is interesting because they have a little gold little tag on the top of the neck, and it looks just like if you've ever seen the jerseys from the NBA the last few years. They have those with the titles on the back. Ours says Duke on it, and I think that's a nice little
Wait, do you know the reason for that? Have you heard?
I don't know the reason why they put it on the Duke jersey. Go ahead.
So get this. So Nike, in unveiling the new uniforms for this year, they put like a silver tab if a team has been to a Final Four as a Nike school, and a gold tab if you have won a national title as a Nike school. Now,
okay.
So Duke should have like 3, 4, or 5 gold tabs.
Mm-hmm.
No, but Duke was Adidas during that first set of national championships.
Okay,
right?
so
yeah.
3.
Jason, this is from your time, not mine. As I recall, the way the story goes is that Christian Laettner picked Duke because it was an Adidas school back in the 80s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Were you even born then?
No, but I've read about this.
Yes. No,
you're right.
So
Duke should have 3 gold tabs, but the bottom line, they just do 1 gold. But bottom line is you'll be able to look at uniforms throughout the season and see which programs have been really successful for Nike, and having the gold tab is a big deal. Donald, I apologize. I interrupted you. Continue.
No, and that's a good point because that is what it's supposed to be on the NBA jerseys. That it has a number for the number of NBA titles that particular team has won. So even if they win another one, they just change the number on that. So it's a cool little gesture to kind of bring that to the college game and again see who these elite programs are. So they're doing that on the away jersey. The road jersey is supposed to be the opposite: blue with the white panels, blue shorts, white panels on the shorts. And I think this is the crisp look. They have said that they will have a black alternate. It's just unclear as to what that black alternate will look like. If it's going to tie into the template that they're using this year, or if it's going to be the same one that they used last year. It's also unclear if they're going to throw the faux backs that we've seen in previous years kind of back into the rotation, along with that 2015 Hyper Elite jersey that we've worn on occasion since then because we won the national titles in them. So it'll be interesting to see what that is. But the traditional home jerseys that we know of are gone. In its place are these throwbacks to the 1990 early 2000s era. And I, for one, like them. I think it was our cleanest look, and I really enjoyed. That was when I was in school, so of course I have a affinity to what I was watching when I was in Cameron as a Cameron Crazy as a student. So I think it's going to be cool to have that look back on the court again. Sam, what do you think about it?
I think they are so hot.
Yeah.
They're awesome. Like I think when you picture classic Duke like the best looking version of Duke basketball, it's Duke basketball from the late 90s. It's like Elton Brand, it's Shane Battier. Those are the dudes who are sort of the most iconic looking Duke players to me. And I love the jerseys. I think that the slits in the shorts at the bottom of the short are a little weird, but I think it's sort of that's
a thing nowadays. That's a whole thing.
Well, the problem is that the shorts now are so like form fitting that you need a little bit more space to move around in them. So to keep them athletic, I guess they have to have that. But I think that the paneling, and especially the paneling on the waistband with the D logo right in the middle looks really excellent. So I'm all for this change.
And I always look at one reaction that's really the most important. The reaction of the players, and they all seem to love it. And if you look good, you feel good, you're going to play good. And these guys, they were the video that they showed of them seeing the jerseys for the first time and trying it on. I thought they looked like they were having a blast. And I think that's cool too, because as someone who watched that team in college is cool. And these guys are, those guys probably don't remember, Elton Brand and Shane Battier. They probably weren't.
Donald, those guys weren't alive yet.
Right. So
my
the fact
God.
that they are, but even like the early 2000s, all the way up to Lil Deng, it's probably when these guys around were born. So the fact that they are, looking at what is an old look for many fans and embracing it like that makes me feel good about it. So
the 2001 title team was the year these guys, the freshmen, were born, roughly.
Okay. So
they definitely don't remember Shane Battier being in college.
Right.
They might remember JJ Redick.
Maybe. Yeah.
No, I doubt it. I doubt it.
Well, they would have been like 5 years old.
Like 5, 4 or 5. Yeah.
And they probably thought Nolan Smith was really, really cool before he started recruiting them and became
became one of their coaches. Yeah.
Sure.
I like it. I have nothing to add on the jerseys. Although the only thing I'll say is, if it brings up any memories of 1999, that is a good thing, because the 1999 team absolutely ate worlds. They destroyed everyone that they played.
I was going to say that I was in Cameron the other day during the camp out. Went to the Duke women's volleyball game on Saturday afternoon, and I was walking around upstairs in the stadium with a couple of my friends. And they have all these old pictures of all these old players, and we happened to be like standing. We were like waiting for one of my friends to go to the bathroom, and we were standing in front of a picture of Mike Dunleavy hitting one of those 3-pointers against Arizona, and I proceeded to give like a 6-minute history lesson on the 2001 team, and I was like, I really would like to just keep talking about them. So whenever you feel like you've gotten enough, we'll stop. But I was like, oh, and there's Carlos Boozer, and he broke his foot, and all that kind of stuff.
And
So
Reggie
I was
Love played,
Reggie Love was on that team, and like he's famous for like totally different reasons. So
Right. The DBR Podcast wants to thank our fine longtime sponsors, the guys from Bird Campbell, a pair of former Dukies who are now lawyers in Texas and Florida. By the way, folks, I mentioned that we could see each other. Donald and Sam are making faces at me as I do my Bird Campbell promo. Guys, this is hard enough. Stop it.
you're the media guy.
I know, and I'm failing miserably. But this is about thanking them. If you have legal needs in the states of Texas or Florida, we urge you to reach out to them at byrdcampbell.com, birdcampbell.com. They mean business. By the way, there was also football going on since we last spoke to you folks. Duke had a pair of games against North Carolina A&T and Middle Tennessee State, or are they just Middle Tennessee? I think they're just Middle Tennessee. No, they're Middle
Tennessee State.
Okay.
Yep.
The Blue Raiders of Middle Tennessee State. Donald Wine, what were your thoughts on these games? A couple easy victories for Duke. We weren't sure they'd be easy victories. These are two fairly well-respected smaller college teams. I think everyone knew Duke had more talent and that Duke was likely to win. I don't know that people thought that the games would be as lopsided as they were.
Yeah, and you know what? I'll say A&T showed out for like the first quarter and a half. They were up at one point, and all of a sudden people were like, "Oh, this team might be pretty good." And then we started taking care of business in that game, and then also against Middle Tennessee State the other night, which was, to my knowledge, the first game that was exclusively on a Facebook page, but which was kind of interesting to watch that game and kind of take it in. But yeah, I think the one thing that I will take from this, and I'll pass it to you guys, is I thought Quentin Harris played very well in both games. I thought he was very good on his feet. He was good finding guys in the air. He made good decisions with the ball. And really, that was why we were able to put so many points on the board in both games. We're going to need that from the quarterback position, the whole season. But to get that, momentum back, especially after the game against Alabama, where it was just, a learning experience for everybody, I think was a great thing. So hats off to Quentin Harris. I thought he played pretty well throughout both games, and I thought he was the guy that kind of paced us throughout it all.
I'm really glad you brought him up, because I'll be honest, after the Alabama game, there were a lot of questions about Quentin Harris. Duke really struggled to complete passes against Alabama. It looked like the offense, admittedly, we were putting in a new, triple option, or whatever you want to call it, kind of offense that we haven't run in the past. But boy, it looked like we didn't want to throw the ball very much. For Quentin Harris to bounce back from that, admittedly against teams that are overmatched to some extent, but for him to throw 4 touchdowns in each one of those games, 8 TD passes over 2 games, is really impressive. His completion percentage, his accuracy, I saw this guy play last year. It really feels like he has improved, perhaps even significantly over what we saw from him a year ago. And I'll tell you the other thing that surprised me a little bit. It feels like Duke has discovered some new wide receiving options. Jalen Calhoun, who is a true freshman, had a pair of really good games. He's catching lots of touchdown passes, and he looks like he's one of Quentin Harris's favorite targets. The senior Quentin Harris is hooking up with this brand new freshman, Jalen Calhoun. He was not a guy who was super highly touted coming out of high school, but he has almost immediately elevated himself into being one of the most important receivers we have on this team. And I love it when the young guys play really well. I want to point out this Middle Tennessee team that we beat 41-18. This is not a bad team. They played a very competitive game with Michigan just a week or two ago. It was like 24-14 at the half, which is competitive. They did not get blown out. Duke beat Middle Tennessee worse than Michigan beat Middle Tennessee. And the other thing about the game was, and I love that Duke did this, we played this game on the road. We have Middle Tennessee for a home and home. I love that Coach Cutt is giving a smaller team like this, a team from a smaller conference, a chance to host a Power 5 conference team. Duke, usually these kind of games are always at your stadium. And I like that Duke took on the challenge of going to someone else's place to play this game. And I really like the fact that we jumped out to a huge early lead. It was 31-3 at halftime. So the home crowd never got to sort of elevate Middle Tennessee, elevate the Blue Raiders, and give them much of a home field advantage. But I like that Duke went ahead and tried to play a true road game, and they should be praised for doing that in these games. And 2 big wins for the Blue Devils, 2 comfortable wins, which is always nice early in the season.
And on top of that, Donald, I think you mentioned it, but we talked after the Alabama game that we're sort of curious to see what happens in these next 2 games heading into that first bye prior to Virginia Tech. And I think we agreed that this first 3 games of the season, the goal was to go 2-1, and Duke did that. And did it I think more convincingly, Jason, as you mentioned, more convincingly than we expected them to. I didn't, unfortunately, get to watch the game last night because of the camp out, but was sort of following along and was pleasantly surprised that Duke sort of jumped out to the lead and didn't let Middle Tennessee get close. Really speaks to the surprising maturity of this team, as you point out, led by Quentin Harris in his super senior season, although his first one at the in the starting quarterback position.
Okay, as Sam was mentioning just a couple seconds ago, Duke's next game is against Virginia Tech. We step up in quality a little bit from Middle Tennessee and NC A&T, and we will be facing the Hokies, who are struggling a bit so far. Their season is not going as well as they had hoped. Historically, you'd go Duke and Virginia Tech playing at Virginia Tech. Oh my gosh, Duke's probably going to be a big underdog. I got news for you, people. We're probably going to be a favorite in this game. Donald, what you got on a preview for Virginia Tech? What have they been going through this year?
Like you said, they have been struggling off the bat. I mean, the first game of the year for them, they lost to Boston College and have since come back. They're now 2-1, but they were less than impressive efforts, victories over Old Dominion and Furman, including last weekend or this past weekend. Furman was a 24-17 game where, I mean, Furman had chances to tie and win down the stretch. So I would say that Virginia Tech probably wants to win those games pretty easily. But if they're having their so-called cupcakes, having games that they have to fight for all the way to the finish, it doesn't speak highly about their effort so far this year. But like us, they do have a bye this weekend, so they have 2 weeks to prepare for this game, which is Friday night. It's a televised game, nationally televised game on ESPN, and is that game that we have been slotted into the last few years, either against Virginia Tech or Miami. So this is a big game for us. And even though Virginia Tech is struggling so far this year, they're going to come out and on all cylinders firing in front of that home crowd at Lane Stadium. So right now, their offense goes through Ryan Willis. He so far has been pretty inconsistent this year. He has 7 touchdowns, but he has 4 interceptions, and guys are getting to him as well. He's been sacked 7 times on the year. Their ground game is going to go through Kashawn King and Deshaun McLeese. They're going to get the bulk of the carries, but Willis is also going to try and put it on the ground. Let me tell you guys, he is not good at running the football, but he is going to try and do that kind of to keep the defenses honest so that he can throw the ball down the field. When he throws the ball down the field, we have Tavion Robinson and Trey Turner. Those are the main targets, along with Hezekiah Grimsley. So far, they've been pretty good on the year. They have some catches, but really, Virginia Tech has had a problem moving the football down the field at will. And on defense, they're not going to force a lot of turnovers. Right now, they only have 2 interceptions, and they've forced 1 fumble. This is really where the cups of this. Like, of course, we know about Beamer ball. We know about their special teams. It's always going to be on point. But if their defense can't, get off the field, then, they're going to allow some points. And they've been doing that so far this year. So what does Duke have to do? Get past their linebackers into space. Their linebackers are their only cogs that they have in their defense, and they've been doing the ones that have been doing the best. But once they get to their secondary has not been playing that well. And so I think that is the key on offense. And on defense, it's really about getting off the field, keeping the Hokies out of it, and really keeping that home crowd, somewhat subdued, and taking away any momentum. So this is a very winnable game for Duke. And usually you don't say that about any team traveling to Blacksburg. But this is a very winnable game for Duke. If they can play the way that they've been playing the last couple of weeks without any mistakes, they're going to walk out of Lane Stadium with a victory in their pocket.
I will say there's an interesting scheduling quirk here, which is that both Duke and Virginia Tech are getting early bye games before this Friday night tilt. So it's not like I think when you initially look at a schedule and say, "Oh, Friday night game," weird
Short
schedules
turnaround,
for
yeah.
the teams that week.
Mhm.
But for both of these teams, actually, it works out really nicely where they're going to get that extra week tacked on to the short week. So I'm not exactly sure how the team manages the schedule that way, but expect both teams to be rested. The question is, where's both of their focuses? Virginia Tech had, to this point, as Donald said, has been underwhelming relative to expectations. They were losing at halftime to Furman this week before turning things around. And I think they figured out how to make their existing game plan work as opposed to scrapping everything and starting over. But they're going to be focused on fixing those mistakes, whereas Duke is going to be looking at building on the success of the last couple weeks. So interesting to see where each team's heads are at the beginning of this game next week.
So I'll give you just one or two really, really quick things. First of all, one thing I've noticed from Virginia Tech is they're really trying to find ways to get the ball to their game breaker, Trey Turner. Donald already mentioned he's one of their top wide receiver, targets. But they've been using him a lot, like in end arounds and sort of bubble screen kind of stuff, to get him the ball as much as they can. Duke's going to need to key on him and not let him make big explosive kind of plays. And then the other thing that's sort of surprising, I mentioned, Duke's probably a favorite in this game, folks. I urge you go like look at the the football power index from ESPN, look at Sagarin ratings and things like that. I wasn't kidding. Virginia Tech is not highly regarded by any of the computer models right now. Their results have been very unimpressive. The Sagarin rankings say even though this game is at Virginia Tech, Jeff Sagarin's computer says that Duke should be about a 4-point favorite. So, wow. I mean, really surprising that we are seen as that much better than Virginia Tech. But, I mean, that's sort of where we are at this moment in the season, and I hope the team lives up to at least what the computers think about our expectations should be.
Welcome to Duke being a favorite in a football game in Blacksburg. It's man, there are a lot of weird things about the future, but this is right up there at the top of that list.
Flying cars are coming soon.
And it's time for our parting shots, and I will begin with Sam Klein. Sam, what you got for me?
So I mentioned at the top, this was the deep tease, was about me being in attendance at Duke grad student campout this weekend. If you all remember, back a year ago, we were supposed to have grad student camp. So grad student campout, for people who didn't go to Duke or never experienced this, the undergrads tent for 6 to 8 weeks for Carolina tickets. Graduate students tent for or sleep out for 1 weekend to get season tickets in September for some reason. So if you did undergraduate tenting, you know that for the most part it's rather cold. Graduate student camping is rather hot because that's what it's like in September in Durham. So last year we didn't have grad student camp out because we had the hurricane that tore through the Southeast, and so they canceled the camp out. This year we had the camp out. So I was on the lawn in Shashevskyville all weekend, or at least all but a few hours of it when I was allowed to go home and take a shower. But it was a lot of fun. Had a lot of friends out there. Everyone was practicing lots of safe, responsible partying. So that was really fun. And one of the highlights is that they brought the basketball team out on Saturday afternoon to say hi to all the campers. So players sort of came out onto the sort of landing area above or below the Schwartz Butters building, above the entrance to the undergraduate area of Cameron. And they came out and waved, and some of them gave speeches. Trey Jones spoke a little bit. Jack White spoke. Javin DeLaurier spoke. And Trey Jones led all the grad students in the Let's Go Duke cheer. And at least from my interpretation, he looked genuinely excited to be leading the cheer in front of all the grad students who are all a lot older than he is. And the other fun thing is that I think we've talked about this, that Justin Robinson is a graduate student now at Duke, and he was out there like hanging out at grad student camp out this weekend. I don't know if he had entered his name into the lottery for the tickets. I'm not sure that he needs them, but
I think he has a good seat already. He's got a really good seat.
Yeah, I think he has a ticket already for the games this year, but you never know what's gonna fall through on that front. But yeah,
he was got family. He's got family.
Yeah, exactly. Man. So I commented to some friends. I was like, it's one thing for the athletes to like stick around for the extra year and go into a graduate school program, but like still maintain whatever their social lives are relative to the team. It appears that Justin Robinson is really just embracing being a graduate student. So he's a real grizzled veteran, and just goes and hangs out at grad student campout. So that was it was pretty fun all around. Had a good time. Didn't get a ton of sleep because I was sleeping in the tent on the lawn in Kville. But lots of fun, and I'll recover in short order and be totally back to normal.
Has there ever been a Justin Robinson story that wasn't just a great story? That kid, I love that kid.
He seems great. In all of our interactions with him, seems like the first player we ever interviewed, right, on the DBR podcast, wasn't a Duke player yet. We interviewed him as he was a freshly committed preferred walk-on, or freshly admitted preferred walk-on, or something to that effect. But so podcast favorite, Justin Robinson.
Absolutely, absolutely. Donald, what's your parting shot?
Okay, so my parting shot is kind of random, so bear with me. So it starts off with this week. As you guys know, I do a lot of traveling, and this week my travels will take me to Munich to go to Oktoberfest, which is one of those bucket list moments for me, and I'm really looking forward to the trip. And so when I'm in some of these places that I'm going for vacation, when it's not, for a specific thing like soccer or something like that, I try to find or sporting events to attend while I'm there, to kind of gain a glimpse of how sporting life is in other places. And so I was checking around, and I was getting tickets to Bayern Munich, who their soccer team plays while we're there. So me and a few friends are going, and I was like, I wonder if there's any other sports. And so I'm looking around and realized that Bayern Munich has a basketball team. So I'm checking the website and I'm looking to see if they have a game. Unfortunately, they do not. But I found out one interesting thing that ties into Duke. Our friend DeMarcus Nelson plays for Bayern Munich, which I did not know existed until just now, like a few days ago. It was just complete happenstance that I just happened to check the roster. Greg Monroe also plays for them, which is also very random. But yes, DeMarcus Nelson, class of '08, I want to say, is a Bayern Munich player and is still playing in Europe. He's listed as a Serbian national because he got Serbian citizenship and apparently has played for their national team at some point. So he's not listed as an American.
Wait,
He's
what?
listed as
Really?
Isn't DeMarcus
Yeah.
Nelson like from Oakland or something?
Yeah. So I mean, this happens a lot in basketball.
He's Serbian now.
Yeah. So there's a lot of teams who are like, hey, by the way, you're never going to make Team USA, so why don't you play for us? And they give them citizenship, and then they end up playing on a national team elsewhere. And it's usually after they've played a few years in that particular country's domestic league, which I believe DeMarcus Nelson did. So yes, he is a Serbian American basketball player that plays for Bayern Munich. Our very own DeMarcus Nelson.
DeMarcus Nelson and I were in one lecture class together. One, not like the full term. He sat in one of my classes like the first week of the term, my first semester freshman year, and then he wasn't in the class anymore. We otherwise
Wait, did he drop it or did he not show up?
I assume he dropped. It would be, I mean, like that'd be pretty poor form if he went to one lecture and that was it.
Yeah.
It was history of jazz, which I think is like a famous
with
Duke.
Paul Jeffrey.
No, different professor whose name I won't mention because I didn't like him.
Yeah, I had Paul Jeffrey. I had the best. It was a man.
And it wasn't with John Brown, who's like the famous professor who teaches it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, but DeMarcus Nelson was in my class. He made it to one lecture, and then and that was it. So I assume that he dropped it and took something else.
Interesting. Yes, I will try to see if I can find DeMarcus while I'm at Oktoberfest. I said Sam, before you logged on, Jason said that we should try to interview him. And I told him that I guarantee you that I will be in no state to interview anybody while I'm in Munich.
Look, we've done worse.
Oktoberfest interviews are the best.
It's what I've been told. I'm not going to test that theory.
If we can get this is next week?
This is this week.
I was going to say, if we can get DeMarcus Nelson for the season preview show and do the stats game with him, I feel like that's going to be content that
I'll do some digging. I can't
really want,
anything, but I'll do some digging.
Well, I find it interesting. We talked earlier about the deep tease. Now we're going to get to the segue because Donald mentioned the Serbian national team. My parting shot is about the U.S. national team and the FIBA World Cup. And folks, if you have been reading the DBR boards, you know that I've been one of the most frequent posters on Team USA and the FIBA World Cup. I watched all the Americans games. I watched a lot of other teams' games. I don't know why I love international basketball so much. It's not nearly as elegant as NBA basketball, but I don't know. I just really like it. I love the notion of people playing for their home country and really valuing that a lot. I mean, like, look, Argentina made the finals, and they made the finals because Luis Scola, who is 49 years old or 67 or something like that. He was in the NBA before Sam went to Duke, I think. Luis Scola.
Yeah, he definitely was.
Yeah, Luis Scola was
Definitely.
like the man for Argentina. Like he scored like 30 something points in one of their games, even though he's basically getting AARP benefits at this point because he loves to play for his country, for Argentina. But I don't want to talk about Argentina. I want to talk about Team USA that lost consecutive games. They lost in the quarterfinals to France and Rudy Gobert. And then they turned around and they lost the game they were playing to hopefully finish in 5th place. Like the US had to win games to finish in 5th place, but we didn't. We played Serbia, who's a really, really good team. There's a reason DeMarcus Nelson is not on the Serbian national team. It's because the Serbian national team is full of NBA players. They are really, really good. So we played Serbia. We also lost that game. So Team USA finished 7th, but they beat Poland to finish 7th in the FIBA World Cup. All right,
Trash.
here it comes. I am pissed. I am angry that so many guys chose not to play for this team. I'm angry at the way Team USA set up their practice schedule and everything else, that they didn't have time for this team to gel together. I think it says great things about Coach K that he freaking never lost. He lost one game at the very, very, very beginning, but he certainly didn't have the number of losses that Coach K over the span of a decade lost once. Greg Popovich lost 3 times in 1 month. Everyone talks about Greg Popovich, one of the greatest coaches of the game, all this other kind of stuff. And I'm not going to say he's not. He absolutely is one of the great coaches in basketball history, but he sucked this past month. He did a terrible, terrible job. The U.S. game against France, Donovan Mitchell was dominating in the third quarter. USA took the lead because Donovan Mitchell was taking over that game. And Pops benched him in the fourth quarter for some reason. I have no idea why. He wasn't running sets to get him the ball. He kept on running plays to get Kemba Walker shots, and Kemba Walker was like 1 of 9 at that point. I'm mad at the players who chose not to play for Team USA. I'm mad at Jerry Colangelo and Team USA for not taking this seriously, for not giving them enough practice time and everything like that. I'm mad at Pops, who I think did not do a good job of preparing the team. Everyone says Coach K had this easy job. Oh, he's taking NBA stars and they're winning titles and it's a big recruiting advantage for Duke. Well, guess what? Now we see it wasn't as easy as Coach K made it look. There's a reason Coach K is the GOAT, and he's shown he's the GOAT, not just in college basketball, but in all of basketball by what he's done, with the FIBA teams, with the national teams in the past. And the last thing I'll say about all this is, next summer, LeBron James and all these other guys are going to show up and say, yeah, I'm ready to play for the Olympics now. I wasn't ready to play for Team USA when it was time to play in the World Cup, but I want to play for the Olympics because that's what I care about. And so, you're going to see LeBron James, you're going to see Paul George, you're going to, Kyrie Irving,
Harden.
all these other guys, Kawhi Leonard, who are going to say, okay, I'm ready to play now. Some of them should be told no. Not the best guys, because we need to, but Tobias Harris, Damian Lillard, Bradley Beal, you guys show up, Kevin Love, CJ McCollum, you guys show up and say, yeah, I'm ready to play. They should say, no, thanks, goodbye. And they should take Donovan Mitchell. They should take Jason Tatum. They should take the guys who actually went out there and tried and did their best to win this summer. You don't get a free pass to the Olympic team next summer, because you skipped this summer. I'm mad. I'm mad because the U.S. did not send our best team, and it pisses me off.
In the beginning of the Coach K tenure, there was a little bit of that. You have to play all the tournaments to sort of be eligible for the Olympic team.
Yeah, they had this cycle that they were on. You played
the 3
World
cycles,
Cup, and then you played,
and so you had to, and then it kind of transitioned later in the Coach K tenure, where it was like, if you he would let sort of the top guys go, like LeBron didn't have to play or something. But the next tier down of guys, like the guys who would be the
First
end
cut.
of the bench, or the so if there are 12 guys on the team, the guys who were like 8 through maybe 20 would be expected to be on the World Championships team. And that sort of became the new model, so that there was a little bit more of a feeder system, and they didn't have to make the senior guys play every summer. But it seems like this year it wasn't even that group that was in there. Jason Tatum is not, as good as he is, he's not in that top 12, 15 group. He's probably a little lower than that, and it seems like a lot of the guys who were sort of in that middle range didn't come, and that Popovich doesn't really seem to care about that, or Jerry Colangelo doesn't care about that. So I don't know where the
Oh no, Jerry Colangelo cares. Did you hear Jerry Colangelo's comments after we lost to
Yeah, I
Serbia?
did.
After the whole thing was over.
What did he say?
Colangelo was like, "Let's be real clear."
He's like, "I'm not going to forget."
Yeah, he said, "We're going to remember the guys that were there this summer when guys want to play on the Olympic team next summer." So I sort of feel like I agree with you, Sam. Look, if you're someone who's played for the national team a lot in the past, if you're someone who's a little more of a veteran, LeBron James, if he wants to play, is going to play, and I've got no problem with that. That's why I picked out some of those guys. Again, like Damian Lillard, Kevin Love. Although Love's been around for a while and he has played on some of the teams, but
LeBron, Russell Westbrook, Kevin Durant, these guys can just kind of step in if they feel like they want to be part of it.
Yeah,
I think there's a difference.
Draymond Green is a great example. Draymond Green would be great at the international game. He didn't bother to play. Blake Griffin. This team needed big men. We needed big men in a big way. The U.S. lost to France because Rudy Gobert absolutely dominated the game in the paint. And in fact, our big men were so bad. No offense to Mason Plumlee, who was one of them. Our big men were so bad that the entire second half, we basically played with like Harrison Barnes was guarding Rudy Gobert a lot of the time. Shockingly, Pops, Harrison Barnes is unable to stop Rudy Gobert in the post. I know that comes as a surprise that an NBA small forward can't stop one of the best centers in the league, but it was a big problem not having big men. So the big men are the guys that I'm really pissed off about, along with a guy like Damian Lillard, whose shooting would have helped because this team was not a great outside shooting team.
So I think what I'm upset about is not necessarily, yes, there's the list of people who declined the opportunity to play, we'll say, but there's also, when Coach K did it, there was a commitment. It didn't necessarily have to play on the team, but a lot of these guys, they're like, hey, show up at camp. And sometimes you would see LeBron James and James Harden and Russell Westbrook show up to camp, and Coach K would be like, hey, thanks for showing up. You're not needed this summer, but commitment noted. You're good. We in here. Go on home and rest. But everyone was on the same page. I feel like with this team, one, nobody was on the same page. This team was constructed, and usually, like, there should be a balance. There should be guys that can shoot. There should be guys that can rebound. There should be guys that can play defense. There should be guys that can dribble the ball. There should be guys that can create shot. And really, what happened against France is that we realized that we had a roster of guys who only thing they were able to do is give the ball to Kemba Walker and hope that Kemba Walker could go around Rudy Gobert. And Rudy Gobert was like laughing for the entire second half because he's like, this is what you're trying to do to beat us. I'm going to throw this ball every single time. And that's what he was doing. Miles Turner had a terrible go of it for even like in the beginning.
Oh, not as bad as Brook Lopez. Lopez was really awful.
And Brook Lopez was so bad that he barely played. And I think in the end of it, I mean, it was a joke that when he was checking the game, other teams were like trying to mock cheer for Brook Lopez to enter the game like you would for Rudy. And I think when it comes to that, like next year, the commitment has to be there. And honestly, it's cool. Like you said, there's going to be some guys that should have taken this opportunity that could have benefited from it, and it would have helped Team USA, and they didn't. Those are the people we need to be worried about, that next year they're going to show up saying, hey, coach, we ready. I'm ready to go in. By the way, I want to have a better approach to it next year, and that commitment isn't there, but also the organization isn't there from top to bottom. And Colangelo, he understands that, and he knows that. I just don't think Pop did. And that's very unlike Pop, because the San Antonio Spurs are literally what they build their team is the way that Team USA wants to play. And he wasn't able to do that for some reason with the players that he brought.
I want to be real clear about something. Team USA, the best team that we could send to the World Championships, included not one, not two, but at least 3 players who do not start for their NBA team. Mason Plumlee, Derek White, and Marcus Smart are not starters for their teams.
Also, they sent half the Boston Celtics, which in my mind, we already were behind the 8 ball.
but I mean, think about that. That's crazy. Like, we couldn't find a team that was even full of NBA starters. I don't get it. I don't get, and I just thought that, to me, the team construction, you mentioned this. The team construction was just really bad. We did not have big men who were the right kind of big men. We didn't have enough shooting from the outside. Joe Harris is supposed to be a great shooter. I don't know what happened.
Chris Middleton didn't have a good go of it either. And he like emerged this past year, but over the course of the summer, it just seemed like whatever he had during the regular season, it left him. He didn't have the legs to kind of shoot the way he normally does. And that really showed, because when he can't shoot, there's not much else that he's on the court for.
Well, and he was on a team that had a good playoff run. So you can sort of see how the scheduling might sort of work against Team USA if you've got all these guys playing prominent roles who played deep into, end of May or into June this summer.
So the Olympics next year are like late July into early August. So that actually is a little bit earlier than this was, because obviously the World Cup of basketball started at August 31st. And so I think that might play into it. But also what that means is there's going to be guys who are not going to have a lot of break between the end of the playoffs and the start of training camp for the Olympics. So
we'll definitely see players who are like prominent, should be on the Olympic team type players who play either in the finals or in the conference finals, who will opt out because the schedule just isn't going to work for them.
Right. And I think that the good thing is the other teams, like, honestly, since the Pistons are going to make the first round and probably lose to the Bucks again, that means Blake Griffin will be well rested and ready to play. So, there's going to be those sort of things, Sam, like you said, but it's going to be interesting because I feel like the commitment to USA basketball is not going to start at the end of the playoffs. It's going to have to start right now. And people are going to have to say, if I want to be a part of Team USA for this Olympics, then this schedule, we already know what it is. So we need to plan around it, and we need to start working on it right now. And I think that's what USA basketball needs to be doing.
Well, like I said, I'm frustrated about it. I think it's a real pity that the Team USA didn't have a better showing. I don't really blame the players. It's not their fault. They did their best. They were what they were. I hope that this causes USA basketball to take a renewed look at how they're going to structure things going forward in the future. I don't want us only to consider the Olympics to be a big deal. I think that the FIBA World Cup is a big deal. And anyway, we're all in complete agreement about that. And that is going to wrap it up for us on 165 of the DBR podcast. I got the number right. For Sam Klein and Donald Wine, I am Jason Evans. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks again to our sponsor, Bird Campbell, the fine gentleman who sponsor us every time here on the DBR podcast. I want to remind everybody, if you want to reach out to us, feel free to email us at dbrpodcast@gmail.com. And you can always find us on the Duke Basketball Report bulletin boards. Until next time, have a good time, and Duke Band, take it away.